Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another Dragon Ball figure unboxing video. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a very special video for you today. One that I don't think I've ever really done before, to be honest. A direct comparison between two different figures from two different companies. And in this case, two different third-party companies. That's right, today we're going to be taking a look at the Xeno Masked Goku Black, Crimson Masked Saiyan, whatever you want to call him, from Demonical Fit, aka the Ultimate Atrocious, and Sobek. Well, don't worry, I'll explain why all of this looks so funny in a little bit for ya. But with these two figures, we have a version of the boy, Crimson Masked Saiyan, from two of the most well-known third-party figure companies. I myself have really been getting into third-party figures lately, and I definitely want to do some more videos on third-party figures. So let me know in the comment section below if you would like to see more content on them. But with all of that being said, we are going to do a direct comparison between the two figures today. We are going to start off with comparing the packaging between the two figures. Then we are going to unbox both of the figures. Then we are going to do a head-to-head for the figures in terms of their accessories, their price, and the articulation. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the packaging. Now, we're going to start off with the packaging for Kong, aka Beast Deities, because I'm sure you're probably very confused. What the absolute heck am I looking at here? Well, let me lay something fresh down for you here. Basically, when it comes to Kong, aka Beast Deities, by the way, I will probably be using their name interchangeably in this video, but they used to be called Kong, and they recently changed to the name Beast Deities. Funny enough, during the time of this figure's release, was kind of sort of mid-transition period, right? Or at least the time that this guy was really being promoted, so they kind of called him both things, you know, in terms of what company it's from, but it's the same company. Now, if you're wondering why this is called Sobek, and obviously the figure inside is, of course, Goku Black, that would be because they are trying to avoid the funny DMCA, the funny banhammer, the funny copyright claim strike, whatever you want to call it. They're basically trying to avoid legal trouble. And this is definitely a good way to do it, right? Obviously, basically just packaging it as something else, and they have basically been advertising their releases as various different gods. As you can see, this is the god Sobek, right? Crocodile boy, or at least I'm pretty sure that's a crocodile, not an alligator. You can let me know in the comments on that one. But in terms of the packaging, right, obviously, the box is very much so tailored for you to not know that there is supposed to be a Dragon Ball figure inside of this thing. The God of Power, Sobek. Can I actually read what this says? According to the myths of ancient Egypt, the crocodile god Sobek possesses 4 times the power of a god as he possessed the 4 elements of the gods. He is the symbol of power, fertility and fertility, as the crocodile god Sobek protected the Egyptian army. This text is so hard to read because of the color on there. The pharaohs and the ancient Egyptian people, his strength and courage allowed the pharaoh to overcome obstacles, also protected him from evil magic. Very cool. Beast Deities, the anime gods all over the world. As you can see down there, it says not a toy, adult collection, intended for adult collection only age 18 and up, choking hazard, small parts, not for children under 3 years. So yeah, I could definitely tell you that. So, of course, the packaging on this is very, very silly, right? And they do actually give you an accessory to go along with the false advertising here, but we'll get to that in a second. For the other piece, we have the pen holder, as you can see here. Very interesting decision to, you know, call this a pen holder. You'll see what that is when we get to the unboxing section. We have the emotional memory bookmarker, which is, you know, it's something. By the way, if you're wondering why this says 32, it's because all of these are technically considered Kong 32, because there's multiple variations of this figure, which, hopefully I can get my hands on the other variations, and I will be doing a video talking about every single variation in one video, so look forward to that. But that's why they're all called 32. And for the accessories pack, we have the 3D Learning Sculpt Kit, which, by the way, was Kong033, I believe, so that's why it says 33 up there. Yeah, it also has the sticker on the side. Not a toy for children, adult collection, yada yada. I think you get the gist, right? Now, as unappetizing as this is kind of unpractical. However, we will get into the unpracticality of the packaging when we unbox this bad boy. Let's move on to DF. I forgot I wanted to mention one more thing. I guess I kind of understand why they decided to go this route of, you know, non-copyright infringement, because this is a figure that I've not reviewed on the channel, but this is a box from a previous Kong figure. This is from the Super Saiyan 3 Xeno Vegeta, which I will be doing a video on this guy in the future, so keep an eye out for that. But, as you can see, this is quite literally the Dragon Ball Legends green LF Goku that they have on the box. Of course, you can see the regular Super Saiyan 3 Goku there, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I kind of understand why they decided to go this route, because if they're just going to be yoinking art from different Dragon Ball properties, that's like double copyright infringement. So I understand why they went the route of, you know, the fake packaging. Over on the DF side of things, they are in their bag on this one. This packaging is so good. I posted a picture of this guy on Twitter the other day, and one of my friends, when I was talking to him on Discord, was like, yo, that box art is gas. This is a absolutely incredible box, and DF is pretty well known for doing these kind of boxes where they basically mimic the event exclusive sort of style of SH Figuarts, except all of their figures are packaged in this way, and it looks super fantastic. Obviously very akin to the SH Figuarts windowed packaging, where you can see the accessories and the figure itself inside. But of course, this looks absolutely fantastic for the art for the Ultimate Atrocious, of course, aka the Master Rose. I don't know who does the art for these. Like, it has to be somebody at the, you know, DF studio, but by golly, they cook. Like, before we look at the back, look at this side, dude. Holy cow. He looks crazy good. That's awesome. And it's obviously not the same on the front, because of course that is the Rose one and this is the base form one. So yeah, very, very nice art on this box. And of course, if we swing around here to the back, you can see, of course, right, we have a bunch of different product images of the figure, which is really, really cool, right? Obviously, again, very SH Figuarts-esque, right? You can see here 6-inch action figure series, right? Basically just talking about Demonical Fit and all that stuff, right? Obviously, a little bit of contact information, some caution, your basic figure stuff, right? On the top, we also have the Ultimate Atrocious up there as well. And if we go to the bottom, right, you can see that the art just kind of extends down there. So I think it's pretty obvious that DF's packaging wins out. Like, I don't think that there's any competition there, that obviously this is a lot better of a looking box. Now, the one thing that I will say when it comes to comparing these two is, of course, when we're looking at these boxes side by side, right? The thing that I suppose is something that you could also make an argument for this is that the package doesn't really matter as much for this sort of thing, because of course you're buying the figure online anyway and you're seeing the images of the figure, right? It's not like you're going into a store and seeing this on the shelf, right? I think it would definitely be a little bit more of a actual, like, important thing about the figure if, of course, you're going into the store, because of course this is insanely more appealing than this, but of course it just matters the product inside. However, definitely for DF though, this nice looking box is a W for them. Listen, I know we already talked about it in the comparison between the packaging of all these items, but man, it's just still so funny to me. Of course, I can't wait to unbox Sobek. That is exactly what I'm here for. So first of all, let us go ahead and actually open up the figure itself before we get into the rest of the items. The unfortunate thing about Kong, or of course Beast Deities, as they're better known as now, is that obviously the packaging, right, like we kind of mentioned before, doesn't necessarily matter that much, because obviously you're buying it for the figure. However, obviously when we were talking about the packaging in that section of the video, we were talking about the packaging from the perspective of the aesthetic. Now, we're going to be talking about the packaging from the perspective of how it's actually operating here in terms of what you get in each box. So just so you can see this, let me turn off my little ring light here. You get the body of the figure. I know, it's just so silly that I can't help but cough a little bit when I see the headless body of Rose in front of me. You get, obviously, the Crimson Masked Saiyan body in the one box here, right? If we pop open the clamshell, which I think is taped. Oh, well, there we go. I thought that was going to be a little bit more difficult. If we quite literally just whoop, put that little bit of tape over there, get the body out, we obviously now have the body of the figure. And obviously this bad boy does not have any hands or head on him, but of course that is what the purpose of the other parts of this package are. But the body does look very good, right? Obviously we'll have to take a look at the articulation in a moment. I'm sorry, my camera is literally doing me so dirty right now. It looks good overall, though, aesthetically, right? Obviously, without talking about the articulation or anything like that, it just looks very nice, right? I think they did a very good job sculpting the various different details on Rose, right? Like if we take a look at his arm, obviously the gauntlets and the whatever you would call those belt things look very, very good, right? They did a very good job sculpting them, right? And of course, too, the body itself also looks really, really nice, right? The muscle detail, especially if we like lift up the arm there, you can see obviously the detail on at the side of the body is also immaculate as well, that good muscle detail. Of course, the legs look good. Obviously, they're using the 3.0 mold for the legs, which is awesome because you get some more articulation with that. So, without the body at play here, the other thing that you get in this box is a little baggie. And this is something about Kong/Beast Deities that I am personally not really a fan of. It's kind of weird because, like, it gets the job done, right? Obviously, you get all of the different items that you are expecting to come with the product, right? You get all of the different hands and stuff like that. But it all just comes in a little plastic baggie, and then you just have a pile of hands like this. So I do kind of wish that Beast Deity / Kong would find a better way to package this sort of thing, right? Do it maybe more like the clamshell that, ironically enough, Demonical Fit does a pretty good job of doing, or all the hands are in their own individual little spot. Now, obviously, right, we'll go over all the accessories and stuff later, but of course, right, you have the, the gloved hands and the non-gloved hands, because of course, that's just what comes with Rose. But you do indeed actually get the crocodile head. And of course, the reason why you get this is because it's to basically avoid copyright for the copyright shenanigans that they have to deal with, right? They obviously advertise this bad boy as Sobek, right? But it actually does come with the animal head, which is very funny that they even bother to like actually include it, because of course it could just be on the production images and then they don't even bother actually putting it in there. But yeah, they do include that, and they also do include little crocodile hands as well, which is so funny. But hey, I mean, I guess more options are always cool. You know, I'm not going to be using that because, of course, you know, the whole reason why you would buy this figure is, of course, for Rose. And this is the other thing too, bro. Now your little hands are going everywhere, and you basically just have to dump them back in the plastic bag, unfortunately. All right. So that just all comes in the main box, right? And it's so interesting because when you get this figure shipped to you, right, all of these pieces come together. Obviously, the, quote-unquote 3D learning kit here is, of course, a separate thing that you have to buy. But, right, these pieces here is what we're looking for, right? So obviously we have the pen holder, of course, right, which we took a look at the box earlier. But is there actually no tape here? Oh. I thought there was going to be tape there. This right here, of course, is the actual head for Rose, which is pretty cool that I guess it has its own box. But, I mean, I don't know, man. Personally, I don't know why. This is really hard to get out. Holy cow. I don't know why they couldn't have just, there we go, attached it to the figure, right? Maybe it has something to do with the copyright shenanigans, right? Because obviously they're calling this a pen holder. but I kind of wish that it was just attached to the actual like body in some way. Now I know what you're probably thinking, huh? This is just hair, right? Which indeed it is. This is just the box for the hair. You do get 2 bang pieces in this, which is pretty cool. With this, right, you get the main Super Saiyan Rose hair, which I think looks pretty good, right? I actually do really like the sculpt on this. I know some people may not prefer the very, very sharp edges, right? Some people like the hair a little bit lighter and fluffy. I can kind of go both ways, honestly, and I think it looks good, though, for the sculpt that it is. And then, obviously, you also get this bang piece, which is supposed to be, right, if we take this off and then put it back on here, right, which, of course, I'll show you this when it is actually like on the figure itself in a little bit. But then we have the Super Saiyan 2 hair is what that's supposed to be. So that's pretty cool, right? I definitely know that I like the Super Saiyan 1 hair a little bit more. But with that being said, right, it's always good to have options, right? I will never be opposed to a figure giving me more accessories, right? Even if it's something that I'm not necessarily going to use. By the way, now we're going into the faces, aka the emotional bookmarks. Obviously, I'm always down for more accessories when it comes to any figure that I own. So this one is a little hard to get open because it doesn't help that I also just cut my nails as well. There we go. All right. So let's see here. We have the face sculpts here, which they all come in this nice little packaging. See, that's what I'm saying. That's so weird, dude. Like, you're telling me they have this nice little clamshell thing for the faces, but they can't do this for the hands? I understand there's obviously a lot less faces than there are hands, but, like, still, I would have loved something like this for the actual, right, the actual hand pieces. Now, let me see if I can I tilt this without them falling? I don't trust that. Let me just dump them out real quick, and then I will show you them all individually. So these are pretty cool, right? I do actually like these quite a bit. Of course, right, you get a bunch of different faces for the figure. You have the neutral face, right, which is pretty cool. And I will tell you, with all of these mask pieces, they do actually come off, right? You do kind of have to shimmy it a little bit. And there is actually a sculpt under there. It's very weird seeing Rose smiling, but I guarantee you they just took this from another Goku probably, because of course, right, when you put the mask on it, you won't be seeing the actual like sculpt of the, you know, smile. So you have that expression. You have the one where Rose is looking down to the corner there, right? Obviously, that's a very iconic shot for the character. And same thing with this mask, right? You can take that off, and then, of course, you get a little expression. Now, of course, the problem is there's holes in the face because, you know, it's meant to be there for the mask. So I guess the cool thing is you can technically have him hold the mask, but, of course, the face sculpt will look weird. You have this squinty eye, which I actually think is for this shot in specific, where he is looking at UI Goku, or more like UI Goku's looking at him, right? And again, right, you can see that we have a face under here. However, it's not painted, but you can see that there is a little bit of teeth there, which is kind of funny. So if you really wanted to do something with these face sculpts, I guess you could. But of course, you do get one where the mask is almost all the way broken off, and this one also does come off. Maybe you could do something like this one where you kind of hide the hole under the hair and then have him hold one of the broken mask pieces, right? Maybe have him hold one of the ones where the mask is a little bit whole. But yeah, very cool, obviously, choices for the faceplates. I think in terms of this character, right, it's basically everything that I would want. I can't really think of, you know, another, like, particular faceplate or anything like that. Even, like, the hands that it comes with, right? I'll show you that, of course, when we do the accessory section. But I just wanted to point out the fact that those masks can, you know, come off. All right. Yeah, so I really like what this guy comes with, right? Obviously, that is everything that is in the package. And, of course, I'll show you in more detail in a moment because we're just opening it all up. But I do really like the complete package of the regular figure. And even without this thing, the 3D Learning Sculpt Kit, I think that if you just pick up the figure alone, you're going to have a good time, right? I think that just getting the standard package, you have a very solid figure on your hands. Obviously, it's a 3.0 mold. You technically get 2 forms, because obviously you're getting Super Saiyan 1 and 2, even though it's just a change of bangs. You're getting some very nice face plates, right? A bunch of different hand options. And of course, the cool thing about these Kong figures is that they all work with each other. Let me actually take the light off there real quick. So, this item, you obviously have to buy separately, which is a little bit unfortunate because obviously the Demonical Fit version of this figure does indeed come with the base form head, whereas for this guy, it comes in this accessory pack, although, right, it's kind of weird because it's like, of course, the DF one is a little bit cheaper, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later, but it is cool that instead of just like trying to sell you another head or something like that, right? I guess even maybe just they could have included the head in there. I do like the fact that at least they have a bunch of accessories. I guess they could have definitely done it in a little bit of a different way, but I don't really like dislike the way that they did it, I guess. In terms of the accessory pack itself though, is there tape on both sides? There is tape on both sides. Let me cut that. We'll cut it on this side, I think. At least they tape everything up, right? Of course, even though the packaging is so weird because, of course, they're trying to avoid the, DMCA, everything in here, at least, is packaged pretty nice. That's what I'm saying, bro. Like, look at this. They made a clamshell. They made a clamshell for all this stuff. You're telling me they can't make one for all the hands, right? So, bunch of very cool pieces in here. Obviously, we have the blade, right? The, key blade for the hand, which is really, really cool. I definitely like that. Of course, once we get to the full accessories, right, I'll show you all of that. But we have, the little hand piece, right, where you can kind of have the blade beginning to form out of his hand, which is dope. And, of course, you have the Sickle of Sorrow, I think is what this thing's official name is, right? Obviously, when we do the comparison between the two is when you get to see these accessories in the hand of the actual figure. But of course, I'm just going to show you all the pieces right now. But yeah, very cool. And the other thing that I do like about this kit, right, is that you can use these accessories on other figures, right? If you have like a normal Rose, all of these things, maybe except for the head, because obviously depending on how big the hole is, right, it might not fit on the peg of a normal figure. You'll be cooking with this accessory pack, even if you don't necessarily have like the Kong figure, which I do think is pretty cool, honestly. You even have this little energy ball there as well, which is very nice. So yeah, in terms of the Kong unboxing experience, right, I think that this is relatively okay, right? I understand the fact that they have to have it in all these different boxes in an attempt to avoid the hammer of Tamashi, but I do kind of wish that they could consolidate it all into just the main box, right? Somehow having different avenues of just being able to have it either all on the figure, right? Or either they just have the heads attached already, or, whatever the case may be, to just make this a little bit more of an easier experience. Because now, look at all of this that you have to clean up. And not to mention, right, now you have to, if you're somebody who keeps boxes like me, right, for all these little pieces, right, where all the different pieces of the figure, now you have to keep all this, and it's not all in just one box like it is for obviously the DF version or even just a standard Tamashi figure. So that, I think, is definitely a bit of a W for DF, for sure. But with all of that being said, at the end of the day, at least you're still getting the product. And speaking of DF, let's go ahead and get into the unboxing section of DF. So, of course, this is basically your typical SH figure arts sort of thing, right? Where you have the little side panel here that you're going to open up. I'll actually turn on my light as well, since we're basically going to get the boy out of the box here. And you just open up the side and slide them out. Actually, let me do it this way so I don't accidentally spill anything. Although I'm pretty sure, yeah, I was going to say, I think there's probably clamshell packaging there. But, of course, obviously, everything comes nicely packaged in this little plastic shell. And again, as we just got from talking about the Kong section, it is pretty clear that DF's packaging is superior, right? Obviously, this is just a lot better in terms of the, appeal, right? The look of the packaging, but not to mention, obviously, keeping track of all your extra parts and just having a place to store everything. Obviously, this works a lot better for that purpose. And not to mention, everything has its own place and it's not going to get damaged if, you know, you're deciding to not use some of the accessories at one time. So let's go ahead and open the packaging. I am actually really excited for this guy. I'm not going to lie. I have had the Kong one for quite a long time by this point. And this guy is fairly new. So it's going to be interesting to see at the end of the day which one I like better out of these two. But this also being a third-party figure with this guy specifically... Ooh, the head feels a little loose on them. There is, of course, going to be no plastic bits like there are for official SHF figures, right? Now, with that being said, of course, this guy is pretty cool because, of course, out of the box, he already comes with the head on his cranium, right? Whereas, of course, the Kong one does not. But, right, overall, looking at the aesthetics of the figure, he looks really, really good, right? Of course, we'll talk about it a little bit more when we do the direct comparison between the two. But definitely very, very fantastic looking. It is really cool to see that DF decided to kind of go for a little bit more of this like lighter pink, right, so to speak, I guess, and then also kind of have these shades of pink like go to white at the top. I definitely like that little bit of an effect there, and the colors that they chose are very, very nice too. Obviously this guy definitely looks really, really good in the aesthetic department. I think there is no denying that. My camera is also currently having a heart attack, so I apologize about that. But, of course, we'll get to articulation when we compare the boys. Let's go ahead and see what else we get in the package. So, with the variation here of the DF1, we get the base form head in the box, which is really, really cool. And this is fantastically sculpted, if I do say so myself. Look at this. This mask is incredible. The way that this looks, oh man, they cook so hard on sculpting this guy for sure, right? Obviously, the Goku Black hair also looks fantastic as well. And the other cool thing is, I believe if we take this apart, because obviously it is just an SH Figuarts figure, I know that some people have been able to get this, right? It's definitely a very specific fit for this particular figure. But I think that I have seen some people get this mask on other characters. And I guess the advantage of this, right, is that because it is just base form, you could put this on any Goku or Bardock figure, because obviously they have the same haircut and kind of get the same effect. Obviously, Bardock's mask is a little bit different when it comes to the Masked Saiyan mask, but that is pretty cool, right? As well, also in the box, we do get the Super Saiyan 2 hairpiece, which I really, really like, to be honest with you. I think it looks fantastic on this version of the guy. And we have the only other faceplate, which is looking to the side here, which also looks really, really good. Obviously, for the iconic pose that Rose does, like, they had to include this face. There's no way that they did it. And then, of course, I won't take the hands out because I don't want them all to, you know, spill everywhere and show you them individually. But these are the hands that you do get with the figure. In terms of, like, for this guy, right, I don't think that there's really anything else that maybe necessarily I would have wanted, right? We have, like, some grabby hands, right? We obviously have some open palm. We have the funny Rose pose hands, right? We have a little bit more almost clenched hands, right? Obviously, the figure comes with the fists. I believe as well at the top there. I'm trying to look. Oh, well. There goes the hands, just what I didn't want to happen. I believe for this hand here, this is actually like a Keyblade hand, if I can get this thing out. Yeah, this hand right here caught my eye because I think this looks like it would be a hand for, you know, Rose's like Keyblade that he has in his hand, but obviously the figure does not come with a Keyblade accessory. However, we might be able to get that out of the Kong one, so we'll see in a second when we compare the two. But in terms of the unboxing experience, that is all for the boy Rose. So let's get into the direct comparison between the look of the figures. Next up comes the aesthetics of these two bad boys. So we'll take a look at them in their default states, of course, just being Super Saiyan Rose, before we take a look at the base form and Super Saiyan 2 versions of these guys. If we're talking about completely out of the box, I think I definitely prefer the Kong version of the body more. I think that the Kong version is a little bit more beefier than the DF version for sure. You can see that this guy is a lot less skinny than this guy. Now, what's really interesting about that is that in some shots of the SDBH promotional anime, he looks a little bit more like thicker, right? Of like almost more akin to the Kong build here. But in other shots, he also looks a lot more like the DF build where he's a little bit more lean and skinnier. So I don't think either of them are bad necessarily in terms of the build of the two figures, right? It's really just whatever you prefer. But I think for my money, I definitely like a little bit more bulky because obviously, I mean, these are just big buff monkey men beating each other up. So it's obviously cool when they look super buff. When we're talking about the aesthetics of the actual body itself, though, rather than just the, shape, I suppose, the first thing that definitely popped out at me is the color of the gauntlets. It is a very slight difference. Well, maybe not that slight, but this is definitely a little bit more on the, pinkish red sort of side, right? Where this one is definitely more on the purple sort of side, right? I think the color for this would maybe be magenta, right? If we do look at the anime, I will say the DF one definitely wins out in that front in terms of being a little bit more color accurate. I don't think that either of them are bad when it comes to the coloring, on the gauntlets, or I don't think that purple color is, unappealing or anything like that. It's just something interesting to note. As well, when we're talking about the actual coloring of the black and gray, which I know is kind of funny to compare, I will say one thing that I think DF definitely has over Kong is that DF, the color difference is a little bit more apparent, right? You can a lot more easily tell the difference between the black and the gray on the DF figure, right? You can see that this part right here is black and then the pants and the undershirt are gray, whereas on the Kong version, you can definitely see that even though it is a noticeable difference, right? When it comes to obviously the black and the gray there, it's not as defined, so it kind of tends to mix in a little bit in terms of the colors, right? It sort of all blends together a little bit, right? Which is not terrible, right? I don't think it's the worst thing in the world or anything like that, but it definitely is just something interesting to point out about the figure. Now, with that being said, in terms of the top half, right, I think that is really the biggest difference about these guys. And this is where we're going to have to get hands-on with the figure here. So, taking a look at the Kong version of him, you can see that the fabric of the top half of his body, right, obviously goes all the way down to his waist here, right? Which makes sense considering the fact that, this is all connected and it's one big piece. Now, it is interesting too because for this guy, Kong did decide to use some soft parts on the figure, right? This is actually a little bit of malleable plastic, right? If you can see me kind of playing with it here, right? You can tell that it is a little bit squishy, right? It's basically the same type of thing that they used for Gohan Beast's top half of his body. Now, while this is good, it's kind of funny because I really like the aesthetic of this, right? From the perspective of, obviously, right, I think this looks really, really good and obviously it all connects. I am a little bit wary about soft goods on figures at this point, only because I kind of feel like they may not last as long as some potentially just hard plastics, because who knows if they will deteriorate. And I'm kind of a little bit worried to pose this guy in fear of stretching, right? If I can get a good close up here, in fear of stretching the malleable material and then eventually ripping it, because I have seen some people who are a little bit too hard on the figure end up ripping this top half here, which I definitely will not be. I'm very careful whenever I mess with figures like this, but it's definitely something interesting to note, right? It's important for you to know that information. And obviously, then it connects to the skirt here, which this again being soft plastic, I think works for the articulation bit, which we'll talk about in a minute. But obviously, then, you know, you can just kind of move it aside and, you know, get some high kicks and whatnot. And obviously the legs, right, this will be more so for the articulation section, but this guy uses the 3.0 joints that SH Figuarts is known for, right, where it's the newer version of their figures where the articulation is a little bit better, but it allows for a little bit more better looking pants, right, where the pants look a little bit more coherent. And especially when you're bending the pants, right, like if we do a full bend, right, this looks a little bit better to me in terms of how the, you know, like folded up leg looks than if we take a look at Rose, who is obviously using the 2.0 joint, right? And you get that kind of little bit of break in the sculpt there because obviously they are using the 2.0 joints for that. Interestingly enough as well, with the arms, you can also see it. It's kind of funny. I swear this arm is a little bit like farther up or something like that, where there's kind of a little bit less of a gap than there is on this one between the two sections of the arm. But obviously the joints are a lot more obvious on this arm here, right, with the 2.0 joints than they are on the Kong version, because obviously the Kong version is using the 3.0 joints and they look a lot more fluid when it comes to how they actually look from an aesthetic standpoint, right? It looks a little bit more like an elbow rather than the DF version of him. The shoes also is something to point out. Let me go down here. They both look good. It is kind of interesting to see. I don't even know if this will be able to focus on camera, but they're more of like a mustard almost on the Kong one, where they're a little bit more like brighter yellow on the DF one. I don't think that either one is necessarily bad. I think they both work fine for the purpose that they serve, but I do like the little bit of the brighter color on the DF one. Now, in terms of the top half of the DF one, it is interesting because obviously looking at the Kong one, right, we can see that, of course, because the top half is very coherent in terms of the top half of the body, right, it looks very, very nice in terms of just, you know, the aesthetic of how the top half looks. But if we look at the DF version of him, right, it is definitely a little bit more, I don't think sloppy or choppy is the right word. It's definitely just a little bit more like obvious that there is a break in the sculpt here, right? Because obviously if we tilt them up a little bit, you can see that they still have obviously the like what would come next, I guess, on the fabric, right? Like leaning down to the belt, right? It's clear that that's still under there to try and emulate the sculpt, but obviously there's a little bit of a break in the sculpt because it doesn't go all the way down, which is really, really interesting, right? And it kind of leaves a little bit of this like almost broken look to the sculpt, in my opinion, which I don't know if I really like. I think it's a little bit better here on the back of the figure, right? But you can still definitely see, depending on how you twist this guy, right, the kind of break in the sculpt there. So it's just, I think, a little bit of an unfortunate thing of not only using some 2.0 technology, but also obviously having the soft goods kind of allows them to have the connection look a little bit better from an aesthetic perspective on the Kong version, right? And they do actually use soft goods on the DF one for the little bit of the skirt there, right? Where obviously if you do these high kicks, it won't really be getting in the way because, of course, you know, the soft goods are there. And it will, though, again, time will tell if the soft goods do hold up to the passage of time and if that does end up ripping. Now, let's get to the head, and then we will compare all of the different forms of the heads, right? I think in terms of the mask, right? Obviously, the mask is one of the most important things about these guys, right? And of course, the, you know, face sculpts and the, obviously the hair and all of that good stuff here, right? I think in terms of the mask sculpt, I would say it's pretty easy to say that the DF one definitely is the winner here. I think that the DF one is just more detailed in terms of the sculpt. And I think the big difference for that sort of look is if you take a look at the DF one, you can tell that the face is very much so sculpted in with all of these details, right? Like you can feel the ridges on the mask of all the different red lines, right? Obviously the bottom part is very nicely done as well, right? And it has this very nice finish on it where it just looks like it's kind of, I don't know, it looks like it was custom painted in a very good way. It is interesting. His face does look almost a little bit longer than the Kong one as well. And I will say the nice thing about the hair sculpt for this particular bang piece is that it gets so in the eye a lot less than it does on the Kong one, which we'll look at in a second. But I definitely like the hair color on this one a lot more for sure, right? I like the way that it's a little bit lighter and then it gets to the edges as well. If we're talking about the actual shape of the hair, it is pretty clear that the Kong version is a lot more angular in nature, right? Whereas the DF one is a lot more softer in terms of the like shapes that are at play here, right? My camera's having a hard time focusing. I apologize about that. But it's pretty easy to see that it's a lot more rounded, right, in the way that it looks, rather than Kong's being a lot more sharper edges and angular is, I think, the best way to put it, right? Even if you give these guys like a side profile like this, right, you can see that there's a lot more sharpness to that. And not to mention there's more spikes on the Kong version, which is kind of interesting. But I think the big thing with the Kong version in terms of the mask, again, when it comes to the head sculpt, or the hair sculpt, I should say, it covers the eye a lot more, which is kind of unfortunate because obviously you want to be seeing that eye for the cracked mask. But I think it is the way that they executed the mask. Let me actually take off the hair piece to show this to you a little bit better. So basically, they did not have like actual sculpted detail on the mask, right? If you touch it, it is completely flat, right? This is basically like a sticker or painted on here in terms of the mask rather than the detail being sculpted in, which already, right, I think is definitely something that makes the DF one stand out a little bit more in terms of the mask. As well, when it comes to the finish on the paint, I don't know the exact word of the like painting technique that is used here, unfortunately, but it kind of makes the details almost get a little bit of a blur to them, and it has a little bit of like a shiny look. It looks a lot more like a toy in the way that the coating is done over the mask, right? It kind of looks like it has a little bit of a shiny coat of paint depending on how you shine it in the light. And it looks a little bit more cheap looking in terms of the mask, right? Again, it looks a lot more like a toy, right? Whereas this, right, with the DF version, we'll take off the bangs for him too. It's pretty clear. That is so cursed. It's pretty clear to see, right, when it comes to the mask detail, right? It looks a lot more, you know, not only is it sculpted in, so it has that level of depth, but it doesn't have that same paint job on there where it looks a little bit more like shiny, almost like toy-esque to it, basically, right? So I don't think that either one is bad necessarily, right? I don't think that the Kong one is bad. I think it still looks really, really good, but I definitely prefer personally the look of the DF mask over the Kong one. Also, something else interesting to note about the DF mask is that it does not come off of his face. It is stuck on there, while we obviously showed in the other section that the masks on the Kong one, if we take this off, right, is obviously a separate piece, right? You can obviously take it off, and there's a bunch of holes in his face, but I mean, like, you can take it off, right? It is technically a feature of the figure, so you cannot do that on the DF one. Now, with that being said, I don't know if you would necessarily like want to do that on the DF one, or I mean, just in general, right? But it is kind of just cool that it's an option, right? Obviously, more options are always a good thing. So, the final verdict when it comes to these two guys in base before, well, not base literally, but like the base that the figure comes in, right? When it comes to the Kong and DF one, it is a very bit of a mixed bag for me personally. I think I like both of these figures quite a bit. Well, I don't think I know I liked both of these figures a lot. I think I like them both for a little bit of different reasons, right? Again, I think it's clear that the mask is a lot better in my opinion on the DF one, and the hair sculpt as well. Well, I definitely prefer the Kong one a lot more. Now, what would be the best of both worlds, to be honest, and I don't think that it's possible, but I'll try it for you real quick, is if you could mix and match. If you could take the head of the DF one and put it on the Kong one. Now, unfortunately, this Kong peg, I've had this problem for a little bit here, gets stuck in the head, so I would have to yank that out if I was going to try. However, the actual, like, hole, right, is, let me get the other head. I'll just use the base one for the sake of the example before we move into actually showing it off on the figure. Obviously, the peg hole on this guy is pretty big, and if you take a look at the peg on the DF one, right, you can see that obviously the peg is pretty small, all things considered, so of course, it doesn't really fit, right, unfortunately. And with that being said, right, if you wanted to do the same thing and then put this one on here, it wouldn't really work as well because obviously the peg is so thick on that body, right? You can see that that peg, if we compare the two, by the way, I'll talk about it later in the video, but if you notice, yeah. I'll talk about it later, though. Don't you worry about that. If we take a look at the two pegs, right, obviously you can see that the Kong peg is a heck of a lot bigger than the DF peg. So if you did want to, you know, do this, you would definitely have to mod it a little bit because, unfortunately as well, like, obviously if I just sit it there, right, it doesn't look awful, but the other problem is that obviously the Kong necks are a lot thicker than the DF neck, right? You can see that my boy has an absolute chonker of a neck there. So if you wanted to do this custom, I don't know how you would necessarily execute this. Maybe you would have to shave down the neck, or maybe you would have to make the hole in the DF one bigger, and then obviously not only just the hole that the peg goes in, but like the actual area that would, you know, fit for the neck. But the other thing is too, obviously, because the figure is just a little smaller in general, I'm trying to get this to balance, there we go. Just because the DF one is a little bit smaller in general, obviously the head will also look a little bit smaller, just like, you know, obviously the head looks giant on the Kong one, or on the DF body rather. The Kong head looks super big, so you could probably make it work in some way, but in my ideal world, you know, my zero mortal plan equivalent, the zero in between Rose figure plan, you would have something like this where it would be the 3.0 body, but with these faceplates for the mask. With that being said, though, this head does actually work on the bodies of other 2.0 figures because, of course, the peg is the same size. So if you wanted to do some other customs, right, and obviously even use this head on your already existing Rose, it is definitely not like a perfect fit. And of course, this isn't actually Rose. You know, you could break out your standard 2.0 Rose figures, but I'm just showing you for the sake of example, right, that obviously the DF one does definitely work with the 2.0 bodies. The 3.0 definitely not, because unfortunately the peg is a little bit different. But again, with the Kong one, right, like, yeah, I think you get the idea. Looking at the Super Saiyan 2 hair pieces, is obviously these you just take off the front piece of the Super Saiyan 1 Rose hair and then apply the Super Saiyan 2 Rose hair for both of these figures. Holy moly, the DF one is leagues and miles better. This was definitely my least favorite part of the package when it came to the Kong one. When I got this guy originally, right, and I was kind of messing around with him, I really did not like the look of the Super Saiyan 2 hair sculpt. And I think if we compare it to the actual anime, it's kind of a toss-up because I think the Kong one might actually look a little bit anime accurate, just a tad more than the DF one. But by golly, I think the DF one just looks so much better. Obviously, the Kong one going for these little bit more shorter bangs that are kind of present in the anime for this guy, while the DF one obviously has the bit of the longer bang in the front. And I think the reason why I like the DF one a little bit more when it comes to the comparison between the two is because it fits a lot more flush on the figure. if you look at the Kong Super Saiyan 2 head connection here, right, there is a little bit of a gap between the mask and the Super Saiyan 2 hair. Now, obviously, this is this faceplate, and especially for the faceplate where we'll get to eventually where more of his face is showing, doesn't quite matter as much, but I think it is still something to note that I think in terms of it just looking like more coherent on the figure, I think that that is definitely something that turns me off a little bit about it. And if we then, in comparison, look at the DF one, the DF one to me looks a lot more flush with the actual hair, right? The bangs kind of go right alongside the head here, kind of almost like cradling the mask, rather than the DF one where they kind of shoot out of the sides there a little bit, right? And then obviously you have this very nice long bang in the front. Obviously the spikes, you know, again, also them doing a very good job of actually having it being different from the Super Saiyan 1 one. It isn't just a couple of extra spikes. If we look at this here, right, they actually changed quite a bit about the sculpt. Let me take it off the head so you can see an even better example of this here, right? You can definitely tell that these two pieces are different from each other. So I think that it's kind of weird because, of course, I guess in terms of anime accuracy, the Kong one looks a little bit more accurate. Bear the gap between the mask, right? Because with the DF one, there is definitely like barely any gap, if any, between the hairpiece and the actual mask. Whereas the DF one, it's pretty more obvious. And even though it looks a little bit more anime accurate, I think I prefer the DF one as opposed to the Kong one in this case. But I don't think that either of them look bad necessarily either, right? Again, this is one of those things where more options are always a good thing. And even if it's something that's not my personal preference, I like the option to have it there. Now then, base form heads. Both of these do look really, really good, but I think that yet again, DF wins out in terms of the sculpt. I think the hair on both of these is just fine, right? There isn't really any too big of differences between them, obviously, besides the fact that, of course, the, you know, Kong one is a little bit bigger to fit the scale of the figure. However, when it comes to the actual sculpt of the mask, holy cow, you can tell that they really put a lot of time and effort and care into the DF version of this guy. The detail on the mask is immaculate, and yet again, the same problems, or I guess just comparisons between these two kind of arise, where you have basically the sculpted detail of the DF one obviously outclassing the sort of like shiny toy-esque look of the Kong one, right? And again, I don't think that either of them are bad necessarily. I think it's just pretty clear that the DF one is just a lot more detailed in the actual sculpt of it. It is also interesting to note as well that the chins, I swear that the chin on the DF one is actually a little bit bigger for like the chin of the mask, where thankfully both companies did a smart decision and didn't use this screenshot as reference, because my boy got the crimson chin going on in this screenshot on the mask. So thankfully, they used the more modest kind of extension at the bottom of the mask. It is interesting to see as well that for the Kong one, it is pretty clear that the face is a lot bigger. I mean, obviously, again, to fit with the figure itself. But, right, with that being said, it is really interesting just to see kind of the differences. And also there's more lines on the Kong one, which I actually didn't even really notice before making this video. But yeah, definitely a little bit more like, you know, red lines all over the Kong one, whereas the DF one has them, I guess, in different spots, to be fair. The lines are a little bit different on both, which is kind of interesting. But both of these guys look really good. But again, I think in terms of the face sculpt, DF definitely wins out on this one. By the way, just want to throw this out there. Trying to put this head on this guy was quite difficult. It really is very tight of a connection. And the first time that I put it in there, it did not have that nice, satisfying snap that, you know, it really should. After obviously playing with it a couple times, I think it will definitely get a little bit easier to kind of just put the head back in over and over. But it is definitely a lot stiffer of a head to put in there than the Rose one. So just be careful of that on the DF one. Before we move on to the articulation, we're actually going to take the camera off of my tripod here and take a look at the accessories, as this is basically the last aesthetic section of the figure review slash unboxing. Obviously, when it comes to the Beast Deities slash Kong version, they get a lot more accessories than the DF one, but of course, that is because this guy comes at a lot higher of a price, which we will talk about at the very end of the video. But you do get all of these different types of hands here, right? Some pretty standard Dragon Ball different types of hands. However, you do get a couple of specific Rose ones, right? Obviously with the different pointing hands, right? That type of thing. It is very cool to see. And not to mention these flat hands are not always included with every Dragon Ball figure, but they are for this guy because they work with some of the accessories that you can get for him. And as well, yes, he does actually, of course, come with the crocodile head. And as I am obligated reviewing this figure to show it to you, here is what he looks like with the crocodile head and hands attached. Yeah, this is incredibly silly, but it is something that you could do if you really wanted to attach this to your figure. So I guess that's pretty cool. And not to mention, it actually takes up his entire neck, which is kind of impressive, to be honest, considering earlier how thick we were talking about the neck was. But anyhow, when it comes to the DF version of this guy, right, you obviously are getting a lot less hands, right, when it comes to this. You do get the funny pointing hands, you do get some grabby hands, some open palms, and you do get one of the key blade hand, right, the one that comes out of his actual hand. As well, in terms of face plates, you obviously get only one extra, right, obviously not talking about the stuff that comes on the figures. You, of course, get the Super Saiyan 2 hair as well. And I think the big difference that is the real kicker with the DF version is that you get the base form head in the box. We will talk about where the base form head came from for the Kong one in a second, but I think that that is definitely something that really gives the DF one a little bit more pull when it comes to the comparison between these two. But yes, these are both of the sets of accessories that the guys come with. I think it is really interesting to see the difference, you know, again, especially the fact that these are a different price point. But with all of that being said, before we get to that final price comparison, let's go ahead and look at the articulation. We'll leave our accessories laid out on the table here and finally take a look at the articulation. Now, if you are familiar with 3.0 articulation and 2.0 articulation on SH Figuarts figures, this part might be a little bit kind of, you know, you already know what you're getting into here. However, I will say there are some surprises when it comes to both of these figures that I think are a little bit interesting. So let's go ahead and take a look at everything that we got here for the boy Beast Deities. First of all, you can get this very nice 360 articulation. However, I don't know if this is just a QC issue with my copy specifically, or if this is something that is a little bit more widespread, but besides the fact, right, this is just an issue on all of them, that you can kind of see there is a little bit of a gap between the faceplate and the hair, right? That is a little bit of a toss-up for me because obviously if you're just looking at them straight on like this, right, you would not even be able to tell that that gap is there. However, this is a three-dimensional object, and it's kind of funny because I swear the problem is not as prevalent on the other side of his head. However, if we go over to this side, as much as I push the faceplate in, and it looks to me like it is in there, there is a little bit of a gap on that side. And especially, right, as you begin to pose this guy, the kind of issue becomes if you stretch the articulation a little bit, yeah, the faceplate begins to fall off a little bit. Now, that is quite literally just because this guy almost has, I don't want to say too much articulation, but if we take the face off, right, you can see that look at how far that the head can bend. That is insane. Obviously, the face would be popping off if you can, you know, move the head that much, right? The articulation on the head is pretty insane, especially considering how thick this guy's neck is. They did a very good job engineering the mobility on this, especially with this more hefty joint. Like, you can get a lot of range out of this thing. Also, the neck does move a little bit, as you can see. However, that is one thing that I think is just something to kind of keep in mind when you're posing this guy, is that extra articulation is there on purpose to be able to give you more range. However, if you almost stretch the figure a little bit beyond its limit, right, then you may end up with a little bit of a broken sculpt. The other thing is too, on the back of the head, right, especially if you put the guy's neck down all the way forward, you can see that there is a little bit of a gap back there. Now again, you're probably going to be looking at the front of the figure, so it won't matter that much anyway. But all things considered, right, obviously it is still something that could be remedied, you know, hopefully in the future with future Kong releases. Like, if we do this, right, obviously then the neck problem is solved, but yeah, that don't look right. So it's very interesting when it comes to the articulation on the head of this figure. I don't think I've ever owned a figure quite like this in terms of, you know, how I felt about how the head looked. It's so weird because whenever you look at it right from the front facing angle, it will look absolutely fine. But then when you get all of these little aspects at play, right, then you will encounter all of these little issues, which is kind of interesting. With that being said, I'm kind of mixed about this because it's like, on one hand, it definitely breaks the sort of like immersion or the sculpt of the figure a little bit. And I mean, of course, for articulation, you're going to have to sacrifice that to an extent. And I would rather there be more articulation and then break the sculpt a little bit personally than there be no articulation at all when it comes to this. But you can let me know in the comments what you think about this one, right? I like that it's there, but I definitely wish it was just a little bit more better executed in that regard. However, moving on from his head, obviously when it comes to the waist section here, right, this guy does actually have some good range of motion. What's interesting is that even though this is cloth and it looks like all of this is connected, you can see that at the midsection here, it is actually two separate pieces. You can turn my boy a full 360, which is kind of wild. So it's cool to see that they actually separated the top and the bottom so you can actually get that articulation. Now, when it comes to the up and down for this guy, this is one thing that I will be worried about as this figure ages, right? Because if I'm posing him like this is stretching the back fabric, and you can see even breaks the sculpt a little bit there, quite a bit, right? And obviously he doesn't really have that much lean, right? All things considered, right? He really is not leaning over that far. And if we go back, right, this is just about as far as he can go back as well. He really does not have a lot of back articulation. But that's also because of the cloth, right? Now, again, this is also stretching the, you know, soft goods that are on the figure. So when I pose this guy, I'm more inclined to have him in neutral poses because I don't want to break that sculpt. Now, again, technically you could take this off, as you can see, right? I can pull down on this and then actually get this off if I really wanted to. But of course, you know, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to ruin the figure. But that is basically the top half, right? When it comes to, oh, and I guess also too, you can see where this connects, right? This is just kind of a consequence of having the top and bottom be separated. But if you do pull them up, you can see where the shirt ends, right? Again, this is more so for the sake of the articulation and not really the sculpt being like this. But as you can see, obviously I was kind of pulling on it, and it does hold its shape pretty well, all things considered, right? It is a little bit of gapping, but I think it's fun. And when it comes to the arms, right, you do have your pretty much standard 3.0 articulation, right? This part of the arm can rotate 360. You have your elbow movement. You have your hands, right? You have your butterfly joint here where the arm can extend really far back like this, right? And really far forward. Again, though, you are pushing that fabric, right? And I would not want to rip that, right? I want to be really careful with that. Also, the unfortunate thing about this guy, too, is that because you have this bit of fabric here, I'm going to put this guy down because I think the camera keeps focusing on him. Because you have that little bit of fabric there, right, for the sleeve, you really can't lift his arm up very far, right? Even though the joint, right, if we like twist the joint to do that, could technically, you know, do it, because these soft goods are there, it kind of limits his articulation in that way. Now, I think that's less of a problem with Beast Deities making the figure and more just the design of the character, all things considered. Because obviously sometimes when it comes to figures like this, design does hinder the character. By the way, we do have, or design hinders the character, design hinders the figure. We do have a little bit of a drop down, by the way, here on the arm, which is interesting. As you can see, it sort of drops down like that. And there is actually an edge here on the arm that I think is just supposed to be kind of like where it fits to the soft goods there. The other thing that I will mention that I think is really interesting in terms of the hands for this guy, and I'll actually bring out the DF one for this, is that the way that they chose to do the sleeves for Rose. So you can see that the sleeves here, right, are very much so soft goods, right? If you see me moving this like this, you can tell that this is a soft piece of plastic here. Also, taking off the hands on this guy is terrifying because you really have to make sure you're grabbing the hand, because if you grab down here, right, it hasn't happened yet, but I would be really afraid to accidentally rip out the soft goods if I'm holding it here rather than holding it on the edge and then trying to pull it out to get the hand to come off, right? I'm sure that it would probably just end up slipping through your fingers and then you would end up grasping the hand anyway. But it's just something to be mindful of. And it's interesting too, because on the DF one, his hands don't have that. It's just a normal sleeve. However, the way that they kind of have this on this guy is that he has these little like almost hand warmer type of things, right? He has these little cuffs, right? Obviously even present on the other side. What's interesting is that I also looked at this for the sake of the anime accuracy when it comes to these figures, and, well, it's kind of both. This is another case where the anime is just a little bit more inconsistent. There are some screenshots where it looks like this little bit more of like a hand warmer type of thing, and there are some where it literally just looks like a cuff on the sleeve. So I'm inclined to say that both did a good job here with that. In terms of the character's design, I don't really think either one is in the wrong on that one, which is kind of weird. Like, I think both did a good job basically just taking, you know, reference images from two different sections of the anime, I guess you would say. Moving on to the legs of the 3.0, though, of the Kong Rose. Obviously, these being 3.0 legs, they do have a ton of articulation to them, right? Obviously, he can get the beautiful spread there, right? He can kick up very, very far. Obviously, if you're talking to the soft goods on the waist, right, will obviously move away, and you can get a pretty high kick, even though, you know, he still has the little bit of the skirt in the way. Obviously, it does hinder it a little bit, but I think all things considered, right, it is definitely pretty good that he can still hit some of these crazy poses with his legs despite the skirt being there. That's definitely an advantage of the skirt being a little bit more soft goods. As well, I will say one thing that I have noticed, because I've been handling this figure for a long time now. Sorry, I don't know if you could hear that. There's a bunch of noise going on outside. I have noticed that the little bit of the skirt has kind of raised up a little bit as I've been playing with this guy, but I guess that's just kind of a consequence of this being soft goods. Like, this guy I have not played with as much. We'll bring out the funny crocodile head, man. And you can see that it's not a big difference, but there is definitely on the Rose head one a little bit more like the skirt is kind of pushed out a little bit, and I think that's just because you know, I've been playing with him a lot. But regardless, though, besides that, right, obviously the legs can do the funny, where they really, you know, can kind of get these super crazy angles. And you have this pretty nice, right, still trying to keep the sculpt type of thing, right, especially if you bend it like that at the knee, right. Very, very good. And obviously the legs, or the feet rather, also have some pretty good articulation. You do get some side to side on the feet. It is a little tight, I will admit, but it is there. You do also get some forward and back on the foot as well, which is nice, right? Obviously, that's always good for helping stand your figures up. And we do get the toe articulation and just pretty decent articulation on the feet overall. My copy here is a little tight, to be honest with you. This foot, funny enough, feels a little bit more loose, but I think that might just be, you know, figure-to-figure quality control type of thing. So that is basically the articulation on this guy. You can still get some really good poses on this guy, despite obviously the limitations that he has when it comes to some of the aspects about him, obviously with it being the 3.0 body mold, right, compared to the 2.0. And I think that is going to be one of the biggest differences between this guy and the DF one, is that since this guy has 3.0 joints, right, obviously he is definitely the better articulated figure, than the DF one, right? Because if we take a look at this guy, it is essentially your standard 2.0 body mold, right? Obviously the head my head, I will say, by the way, from doing this entire video, it has really like not been able to stay on that well, I swear. I don't know why that is the case, but I feel like it hasn't been like able to sit right on the figure as much. It's still like works, but definitely I think you know, obviously with of course the mask being at the bottom of this guy too, it will definitely limit a little bit of the head posing, I think, right? Because you can still get him to look up and you can still get him to look down, right? And obviously he'll look down pretty far, but right, obviously when it comes to the head, I don't know what's going on with my peg here. It's kind of doing me dirty, I'm not gonna lie. There we go, that's a little better. I do feel like by the way, I think it may just be on my copy, because I don't really see this as a widespread issue, but I swear the, like, joint on the head is a little weird. Like, it feels a little bit too loose. I just reattached the head. I took off the face and then really put the peg in there. I will say, when it comes to articulating the head, like, I feel like it kind of bounces back into position a little bit, as you can see, right? When I'm letting go of the figure, I'm not, like, trying to flick it, right? Obviously, for certain positions, like looking up, right, it won't really matter as much. But, you know, looking down, it seems like he has a little bit of trouble doing that because the head will then kind of readjust to the position that it was in before. But I guess I am kind of pushing it a little bit, but it definitely feels a little bit like, I don't know, springy in the way that it is. It's so weird, right? Because I'm just letting go and it's like bouncing back where it shouldn't do that. Very weird. Again, I kind of wonder if that's just on my copy. This kind of feels like my full power Super Saiyan Goku in terms of the head, which I don't really like. But again, that may just be a QC issue with my copy. You would have to look that up and see if other people's reviews had that issue. I may even put something on the screen if I can find that when it comes to other people's videos. In terms of the top half of the body, though, right, obviously he does have the very nice movement there. He cannot rotate 360. He maybe can, but it would be really pushing it, and I don't want to break the figure, right? But obviously with the plastics at play, he can still bend pretty far, all things considered, right? He still gets some good range of motion, and because these little things do go over the edge there, right, he does get some decent crunch, not like crazy, but his back is definitely where he suffers the most, I think. You really do not get much back motion out of this guy. Like, he cannot really lean back that far, unfortunately, unless you're obviously putting the legs at play there. In terms of the arms, right, again, you kind of get your standard 2.0 articulation, right? Obviously, that can move 360. This can move 360, right? You have your bend at the elbow, and then you, of course, have your rotation at the hands. The one thing that is kind of unfortunate is because this guy is the 2.0 body mold, you do have these kind of gross-looking little sleeve things, which is definitely something that I think the Kong one does a lot better. Because they have the advantage of having the, you know, soft goods be there, they don't have this extra piece of plastic that kind of breaks the sculpt up at the top when it comes to where the sleeves are, right? This little black piece of plastic here kind of reminds me of some of the like 2.0 Goku figures where they have that little sleeve cuff there, and it kind of looks a little bit weird in certain poses. But I think like overall, just the body sculpt on my boy here looks a little bit better because obviously you have, you know, these little plastic bits there. With that being said, though, obviously, right, moving down to the legs again, these are standard 2.0 legs, right? They can kick out still pretty far, not as far as the Kong one, but obviously, again, that also doesn't help the fact that, you know, he has the skirt. So, you know, I can't really give it to the legs as an L on that one. He can do a pretty decent spread, right? Pretty decent splits. And when it comes to the leg bend, again, it is your standard 2.0 legs. So when it comes down to it, right, that is the articulation that you can kind of expect to get when it comes to his legs, right? Definitely not too bad, but it is pretty clear that the 3.0 legs are better and obviously look better because the knee definitely looks a lot better, I think, than when it comes to the 2.0, right? Unfortunately, my guy's feet are not that well articulated. You can see that he does have some side-to-side pivot. Funny enough, this foot is a little bit better than this foot. This one is a lot tighter when it comes to the joints, right? Even if I pull it out a little bit, it's still kind of just a little bit tougher than this foot here. And the front and back kind of rock, right, is definitely a little bit better on this foot. But if we take a look on this one, yikes. There is like, I don't even know how to show you that there's nothing there because it doesn't really move that well. There's not a lot of articulation on this. Obviously, you have your standard toe articulation when it comes to SHF, but it's really weird that this guy's feet don't move that well, to be 100% honest with you, because obviously that helps a lot when it comes to balancing a figure. I've tried to do this a bunch of different times in this video where I'd kind of lean him back and his feet just won't lean back, which is really, really weird. I don't know why the feet are that tight, because I've gotten other DF figures in the past and they don't really have that issue. So again, I don't know if it's just a problem on my copy or if it is a problem on multiple copies of this guy. We have finally made it to the end of the video. So, what is the verdict? Which figure do I recommend you pick up? Which figure do I prefer? And which figure can you realistically get? Let's talk about it. As I go through this section, I'm going to have a bunch of different pictures of all of the different accessories and the boys fighting it out, having solo pictures of them, obviously using the accessory pack for the Kong Rose. All kinds of stuff is going to be on your screen for a little eye candy as I give you my final decision. Before that, though, I do want to show on the screen the prices next to everything that I have for you laid out. The Kong, aka Beast Deities Crimson Masked Saiyan, comes in at a total of $61.99 USD. The accessory pack for the Crimson Masked Saiyan Kong version comes in at $31.99 USD. And for the Demonical Fit Ultimate Atrocious, this guy comes in at $39.99 USD. All of these prices are from the website that I picked these guys up, 5K Toys. Not sponsored or anything like that, but if 5K Toys, hey, if you want to hit me up, bro, I'm down because I love your website. I get figures from there all the time. But 5K Toys was the website that had both of these figures available, and they are basically the official partner of Kong. So when it comes to buying any Kong or aka Beast Deities products, that's the website you go to, and DF recently started selling on there, and since I've been using the site for Kong stuff anyway, I figured why not get it off of there, because otherwise I was just getting it at other third-party sellers. Now, obviously, this is a pretty big price discrepancy between the two of these guys, right? Being about a $22 price difference for the standard package of the Kong Crimson Masked Saiyan, and of course, having the extra pricing of the accessories pack, right? Compared to the Boy Ultimate Atrocious. Now, if we compare just the two figures standard, right, with what each figure comes in the box, not including the accessory pack, right? Now, the price difference from these two comes from two major factors. For one, the accessories included. Obviously, when it comes down to it, the Kong version comes with more hands and more face plates, right? Obviously having two extra pairs of hands than the DF one, right? Or technically, I guess you could consider half of a set of hands because the DF obviously has the one where it's meant for the Keyblade. But of course, right, having three extra face plates instead of one, both share the Super Saiyan 2 hair. And I don't know if you would necessarily equate these two things together, and we'll talk about that base form head in terms of between the two of them in a second, but technically they do both come with an extra head. Obviously, you're not really going to be using the crocodile head, unless I guess you really want to, but that is technically, I guess, a bonus head and hands that it comes with. It's not really meant for the figure, but I guess we do technically have to include it because it is a part of the full package, right? Now, That being said, the other major difference between these two figures, besides the accessories, is of course the articulation and the bodies, right? The Kong one has the 3.0 body, the 3.0 articulation, far better and far superior, right? Obviously, when it comes down to it, you're just going to be able to get more dynamic poses out of this guy than you are the DF one. Now, that doesn't mean that the 2.0 posability is bad by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, there are so many great figures that have been made with that standard body mold that I think that it's hard to say that obviously I wouldn't recommend a figure even if it was still using the 2.0 mold. But when it comes down to it, those are the two main aspects that obviously is the difference in price for these guys. Now, obviously, you can kind of gauge whether you care about these two different things to kind of see if the price is justified for you. For me personally, I think that the price is justified with the accessories and the articulation in mind, having it be a little bit more of an expensive figure. However, I think if you just want a standard Rose and you don't really care about articulation as much, right? If you're not someone like me who's always in the nitty-gritty of this sort of thing, or you're doing a ton of figure photography with this guy or all that kind of stuff, right? I think you will definitely be happy with the Ultimate Atrocious, right? Only being around that $40 mark, just sacrificing a little bit of posability on that front, right? And obviously a couple less options to your name. Especially that one head where obviously has the mask a little bit broken and you can see more of Rose's face, right? But I think if you pick up either of these standard packages of these figures, you will be very happy with your purchase. Now, the one thing that I do want to say when it comes to the Kong one that I feel like is a little bit unfortunate, and one thing that I can really give the DF one in terms of just the options that are available when it comes to the figure is of course the difference in the base head. Now, when it comes to the other stuff that the accessory pack comes with, you definitely don't need those things, right? The extra hands that obviously are there to work with the accessories themselves, right? The scythe, the keyblade, the key ball, right? Forming the keyblade between his hands. All of those things are super cool and they look awesome, right? They did such a good job sculpting them, right? The paint job looks amazing, right? They just look really, really cool. And not to mention, if you do buy this accessory pack, you could use this on any Rose figure that you have, right? Obviously, you're not limited to using it on the Kong one. You could even use it on Ultimate Atrocious over there. You could use it on the DF one, which I think is really funny that technically you could, cross the streams on that front and have the accessories work on any figure. So that is cool. But I think the problem comes in when you take into account the head. Obviously, when it comes to Crimson Masked Saiyan, a huge part of the character is the base form head, the Super Saiyan Rose head, and funny enough, both of them obviously include the Super Saiyan 2 head, which I feel like isn't as big of an iconic piece of the character, but it is still really cool that both companies decided to include it here. That is just the really unfortunate thing about the Kong one, is that they shove the head into the accessory pack rather than including it in the figure's regular package. Now, it's a little bit of a toss-up for me to say this, right? Because I still think you're definitely getting your money's worth when it comes to everything that is in the standard package of the Beast Deities Kong Crimson Masked Saiyan. However, with the base head, it definitely kind of feels like more to me that they wanted to have an excuse for you to buy the accessory pack. So they shoved the base form head in there. So then you felt a little bit more inclined to be like, oh, well, I guess because I want the base form head, I have to get the accessory pack because I want the option to be able to have the base form. And I'm sure for some people, they probably only care about the Rose form. But I think for obviously a lot of people who really like the character, the option just being there is really cool. And not to mention, obviously, if you have other figures from either of these companies, right? Especially with Kong, right? You can take the faceplate of the full mask off and then use that faceplate on other figures. So you could technically get masked versions of a bunch of the different characters that Kong has released. And obviously it looks a little bit more weird with, of course, the cracked mask, because then you have the little bit of the pink from the Rose coming in there. But with the base form, obviously the entire face is covered, so you just have the full mask effect. So it's a little bit hard, and not to mention, obviously the accessory pack is a little expensive as well. Coming in for a solid $31.99 once again, it feels a little bit overpriced for what you get, right? I understand that there are even some accessory packs for other figures that definitely go for a similar price. I mean, even if we take a look at something like Tonson Art Toys with his amazing head sculpts for Vegeta, right? I believe those are about $35. The price will be on the screen regardless. But those are a bunch of head sculpts, right? So it kind of feels a little bit more worth it. And not to mention, obviously, Tonson is always cooking with how good these look. They look immaculate. And when you look at the Kong accessory pack, with what you get in it, right? It definitely feels a little bit like this maybe should have been on the like $20, $25 side of things, right? All things considered. Obviously, again, it does have the versatility of being able to be used with everything, so that is definitely a little bit more worth it for your money, but still, I feel like it is slightly overpriced, and it is just a real shame that they decided to throw the base form head in there rather than putting it in the package, because I definitely think that even though this accessory pack is cool, people probably wouldn't have been as inclined to pick it up if the base form head wasn't in there. I know me personally, even though the effects are really cool and I've enjoyed using them for taking pictures for this video and for my Instagram and whatnot, it's just they're not necessary, even though they are cool. And it feels like in terms of the base form head, in my mind, my, collector ape brain, the base form head is necessary. So it makes me a lot more inclined to pick up the accessory pack to be able to have that option. And not to mention, even for me specifically, right? Like I showed before, obviously he has the funny crocodile head on right now, but I picked up an entirely another figure for the Kong one, just so that I could display it with the base form head. And I don't know if I would have done that if the head wasn't included in another package. Maybe I would have, just because I really like the figure, and the whole point of doing that was for when all of the variations of this guy come out, I can then be able to display all of the different variations. I guess technically I would need another one if I really wanted to do Super Saiyan 2 as well, but as I mentioned earlier in this video, I like the, DF hair of the Super Saiyan 2 a lot better than I do the Kong version of the Super Saiyan 2 hair. But regardless, though, the final verdict of what I can recommend for these guys and which one I like better. I think for me personally, and for my money, literally in this case, right, I would pick the Kong version. I like the look of the figure overall a lot better than I do the DF version. It looks a lot more clean. And when it comes to aesthetics, right, obviously I care about a good mix of articulation and aesthetics when it comes to my posable figures. And I think the aesthetic of this guy just can't be beat. The top half is so clean in the way that it looks and in the way that it works. Not to mention, obviously, even though I prefer the DF head sculpt, these heads still look fantastic. And not to mention, you still have the option of the Rose where the mask is a little bit more cracked on the side. So if the more toy-esque look of the mask isn't necessarily your thing, you could always go with that faceplate, right? Not to mention, right, obviously having the soft goods is definitely a cool thing about this figure, even though I'm a little bit iffy on it. This guy has honestly warmed me up to it a little bit, just because it definitely looks really, really good on the figure. However, I definitely don't regret my purchase of the Ultimate Atrocious, because I still think he looks really, really good. And not to mention, like I've said so many times throughout this video, those head sculpts, man, are just so incredible. DF was really in their bag when they were sculpting the mask on this guy. He looks absolutely incredible. And I think for his price, right, it's definitely a good thing with all of the accessories that you get. And not to mention, right, even though, like I said before, in terms of the pricing for these guys. I think that the Kong032 is still worth it, even though he doesn't come with the base head for the things that he does come with. I'm glad that the Ultimate Atrocious came with the base form head, because I think he may not have felt as worth it or as complete of a package if he didn't come with that head, especially being the 2.0 articulation, right? By the way, in terms of that 2.0 articulation, the whole reason why he has a 2.0 body and not a 3.0 body, because obviously Demonical Fit has released the amazing 3.0 Goku that everybody has been raving about. I have not gotten that figure yet myself. I may get it in the future, but I'm also getting some Kong 3.0 bodies when it comes to some Super Saiyan 3 Gokus that will be for a future video. But when it comes to that DF 3.0 Goku, you would think that they would just use some of the aspects from that figure and then transfer it over to this guy. However, DF announced this guy a really, really long time ago. A couple of years ago, in fact, if I remember correctly. And during that time, that was still during the 2.0 era, or at least when 2.0 figures were obviously just the main thing, right, before they fully transitioned or transitioned at all. I don't remember the exact time, but obviously, again, it's on screen, that, of course, the 3.0 body was a thing. So, they didn't do any updates to the figure. They already had him made, basically, right? They had the files for him. You know, however, I know they don't 3D print them necessarily, but obviously, like, the model, right, was based off of the 2.0 mold. And of course, they just took that from, you know, what they had back then and just decided to finally print it. It is kind of funny because obviously Kong announced this Crimson Masked Saiyan figure here, and then DF, out of the woodwork, decided to bring this guy up because they are kind of notorious for making figures and showing them off and then never actually producing them and putting them into production so that you can actually purchase them. They have done that time and time again. And I love DF. I think they're a great company. I have a bunch of their products. But by golly, I wish they would release the stuff that they show. So it is kind of interesting that this guy eventually got released. And I almost wonder if it's only because Kong released their version of this figure and DF was like, well, time to capitalize. Make a cheaper version of the figure, a cheaper alternative that people will obviously be more attracted to the price. And even though it's not as good articulation, people will still buy it because we're a reputable company in the third-party figure space, and you save a couple dolans along the way. Now, in terms of what I recommend for you to buy, realistically, this is up to you. Obviously, it is your choice what to do with your money, right? If you think that you should pay those 20-some extra dollars for the extra articulation of the Kong Super Saiyan Rose, then by all means, I would say definitely pick it up. It's a fantastic figure, right? And I think that you will definitely feel like you got your money's worth. However, if you just want a masked Rose and you don't really care about the articulation as much as well, if you obviously want, you know, the base form head included in the package, and not to mention you don't care about a couple of the extra hands that he comes with, right? Not to mention some of the extra face plates that the Kong one comes with, I think the DF one is a fantastic option for the price. It is at a very, very good price point, I would say. I think they priced it just around the point that I think is perfect for the figure, to be 100% honest with you. I think you will definitely feel like you got your money's worth out of him. And I mean, he is really cool. And not to mention, the packaging is definitely something that also, you know, as much as obviously I said in this video earlier that the packaging doesn't matter as much necessarily, when you open this thing, you feel like you're getting a premium figure looking at the box. And I think that that is something the DF does really, really well. Now, when it comes to purchasing these bad boys, this is where things become a little bit more difficult because, as I mentioned, I got both of these figures on 5K Toys. However, the Kong Super Saiyan Rose is unfortunately sold out and has been sold out for quite some time now. When it comes to these Kong figures, it's really hard to get a review of this guy up in a timely manner that the figure would still be available because they go up for pre-order so long in advance before they actually get shipped out. And not to mention, even after they get shipped out from those first initial pre-orders, a lot of the times 5K Toys will get extra stock, and so you can order them from that extra stock if you missed out on that initial pre-order. But that stock usually goes so quick that it is really hard to get your hands on this guy. So if you are interested in Kong figures in the future, I would say definitely follow their Instagram and keep an eye on their website to see if they put anything up. Interestingly enough, if you do want the accessory pack, that is actually still up on Kong's website. Of course, unfortunately, the base masked head may not fit all of your figures, but when it comes down to it, I suppose you could obviously use the accessory pack for an already existing Rose figure if you would be interested in that. And you could use the base form head for one of the upcoming releases. These guys were available for pre-order a while ago, and as I said, right, once the pre-order stock comes through to the website, they always put up any extra stock that they have. So if you want to maybe wait and see if you can snag one of those, because I am definitely going to be waiting to see if I can snag these other variations of the figure, you could theoretically use one of those bodies and then obviously have the base form head on that. You just obviously wouldn't get the Rose head. Now, if you really want this guy, you could look on third-party sites, which is weird to say considering this figure is a third-party figure, but I guess a third-party site? Would that be like a sixth-party site? I don't know. But something like eBay, right? Where obviously they have people just selling whenever they bought the figure and then obviously putting out it for sale. But the prices on eBay for this guy, there aren't that many listings, surprisingly enough, at the moment, but holy cow, that is a lot of money. And I'm going to be honest, as cool as this figure is, I don't think that I would be paying these exorbitant prices for this guy. So, as unfortunate as it is, you might have to just look around, poke around some different sites like that eBay and Mercari to see if you can find a listing for a decent price. This may be a little bit higher than MSRP, or keep your eye on 5K Toys to see if they do end up getting some more stock. Again, obviously you can definitely wait and see if you can cop one of those rosés, which you probably will be able to, because usually their extra stock is quite a bit of extra stock. Like, it's not just they get pre-orders and they get a couple of extra. It's more like they get a bunch of extra stock on purpose because they know people miss the pre-orders, and then people can buy those ones, right? Now, when it comes to the DF Ultimate Atrocious, this is another reason why I can recommend this guy to you right now, because he is actually still available on the 5K Toys website. At the time of this recording, you can go on there and cop this guy right now if you really want to. So, of course, I will leave links in the description to everything that I talked about in this video in the description. And you can definitely go over there and cop this guy. I will say it is kind of ironic that, you know, the cheaper figure is the one that is, you know, still technically in stock, but to be fair, he did go up for availability a lot later than this Kong one did. So I guess it kind of makes sense, and obviously there would still be stock in stock. But that is going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This is probably one of my most comprehensive figure unboxing / reviews that I have ever done. I've always wanted to do a direct comparison video like this before, and I thought doing this with these two third-party companies would be a fantastic way to be able to finally do that video that I have wanted to do for a long time. And not to mention, this is obviously just such a unique opportunity, because of course, when are we going to get third-party companies making such a very specific character and transformation both around the same time, right, that we can then take a look at and kind of compare them to each other. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and a sub below. Let me know what figure you would pick if obviously you had the option, or if you have either of these guys, you know, let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear about it. And with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace. Post-editing Dokkan Assets here. What's up, everybody? I just wanted to give you a quick little update because I wanted to make sure that this was included in the video as I was working on the filming and the picture taking for this video. Unfortunately, I had both of my Kong Super Saiyan Rose figures break on me. As you can see, one of them, the arm peg broke off, and the other one, the ball at the end of the wrist peg, snapped off and is now stuck inside the hand. I did email 5K Toys to see if they could help me because I did see on Instagram that they were offering replacement parts for these figures, but unfortunately my initial email to them was 16 days ago at the time of this recording. So I did send them another follow-up email because as I was finishing taking pictures for this video, that is when the wrist peg broke. So unfortunately, that is just gonna have to be something I'm gonna have to live with. I'm really hoping that the Super Saiyan 3 Rose figures don't have this QC issue. Obviously, we'll see. I'll give you guys an update on this when that video comes out. If I get any sort of update, I'm really hoping that I can. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to glue the joints and then pose them permanently forever, which will kind of stink, but it is what it is, I suppose. I'd rather have a posed figure look good than, you know, have a broken figure. So I just wanted to make sure that this was in the video because obviously it felt like this was something important to include. I don't think that this necessarily takes away from my talking points about the Kong figure because I'm assuming that this is just going to be a case of QC issues with my particular copies of the figure. I don't think that this is a widespread issue because I have not seen anybody encounter these issues in other reviews that I've watched of this guy. So I'm thinking that it's probably just I got unlucky. I suppose it could definitely be that other people had this problem. Definitely let me know in the comments if you know if either of these issues are common problems with this figure. But I am hoping that I can definitely do something to fix these guys, right? At the end of the day, like I said, I can always just glue it into one permanent position, but that would kind of stink for an articulated figure. But oh well, what are you going to do? Regardless, though, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good day.